When it comes to what your family eats and drinks, you know your choices matter. You're the expert because you know what fits your life. And getting it right starts with good information. That's why America's beverage companies are sharing more information about our ingredients at goodtoknowfacts.org. No spin, no judgments, just the facts straight from the experts for more than 140 beverage ingredients. Visit goodtoknowfacts.org.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome to another episode of the No Huddle Show, our Philadelphia Eagles podcast for NJ.com. This is Cayden Steele, and joining me today, as always, will be my co-host, Bob Brookover. The Eagles had a bounce-back victory over the Minnesota Vikings in Week 7. Was that win impressive enough to the point where we're confident in the Eagles turning around the season after a really embarrassing two-game losing streak prior? Or are those weaknesses that the Eagles showed in those two losses and through the first 4 weeks of the season, even when they started 4-0, would they come back to still haunt this team? Where are the Eagles is the biggest question, and what type of team they're going to be, we still don't know. The NFC is wide open. We'll talk to you about, what this Eagles team does well right now, what impressed us on Sunday, but what leaves us still a little bit concerned. But first, this episode is brought to you by Penco Tech. With 2 convenient campuses in Blackwood, New Jersey, and in Bristol, Pennsylvania, Penco Tech has provided comprehensive hands-on career training for more than 50 years, featuring programs in HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and automotive technology, and more. With dedicated instructors and career placement assistants, Penco Tech can give you the skills and confidence to build a brighter future. Financial aid is available to those who qualify. Learn more and take the first step by going to pencotech.edu. And let's get right into it, Bob. The Eagles rebounded against the Minnesota Vikings with a 28-22 victory. And we talked about, or everyone's been talking about over the last week, this game was really important for the direction of this team. Were they going to rebound, potentially get back on track, or was this going to be a spiral out where things continued to get worse? It's one game. There were some good moments. I wouldn't say they played particularly well throughout the course of the game, but they made some big plays on offense. The defense came up with some key stops when they had to. Are you feeling better about the direction of the Eagles after what you saw on Sunday? Are you less concerned about maybe some of the issues that you were concerned about on offense or defense after what you saw?
Yeah, I still think there are issues for sure. But they needed to get in the win column to build some confidence. And as they talked all week about the swag, and we saw it in Nick Sirianni's the brief whatever post game speech they showed this week. It was the message basically was all that matters is winning and getting better. That was it. So they got the winning part. Did they get better? Yeah, they were a little bit better because I think the Vikings are a pretty good team without a quarterback. Carson Wentz. There's a funny video circulating on Instagram right now about the 5 worst passes of the week for Week 7, and they were all Carson Wentz passes, and they were a pretty funny video. But anyway. And a better quarterback maybe beats the Eagles in this game. Although on the other hand, the Eagles also, they ended up with 28 points and 7 of them came on defense. But there's a missed field goal in there, and it also felt like at the end, if the Eagles really wanted to score again there, they could have scored there. So the 28 points is a little deceiving. Could have been 35, 38 points. They had their best game for the first time this season, I believe. Maybe not. They didn't. No, they didn't end up. I thought they did end up with more yards than the Vikings, but they didn't. They took some minus yards. They still haven't ended up with more yards than the other team and won a game this season. They actually had more yards. Did they? No, I don't think they've even ended up. That was the Giants game. I'm looking at this here. No, they still haven't ended up with more yards than the other team in any game this season, which is a crazy statistic. Yes, they're only I think they're a +5 in point differential so far this season. Yeah, +5. So this team still has plenty of issues, but they got the win. Um, and I thought they played pretty good defense, but they did get some breaks. One of them being Carson Wentz being awful, but and I thought they proved that they are, yes, an explosive offense. And Jalen Hurts played out of his mind, in my opinion. He played one of the best games of his career. And if you have a quarterback that can play like that at any given moment, you got a chance in this league. And he was terrific.
That's the most important thing for me from that game was Jalen Hurts' performance. 19 of 23, 326 yards, 3 touchdowns, a passing rating of 158.3. Um, Big explosive plays, improvising on some plays to extend plays when routes broke down. He was incredible, and that's really what matters in general. I know there's some run game concerns, and I'm sure we'll dive into that and dive into it until it's fixed, and it hasn't been fixed yet. But that was the best game, arguably. I mean, in Jalen Hurts' career, take out the significance of the moment because it's just a regular season game. But he was clinical, and he was near perfect. He was awesome, and if he plays at that level, this Eagles offense will figure things out. At least from the passing offense, they have a chance to be really dangerous. And he's the type of quarterback, from my perspective, just seeing him throughout his career. When he gets hot and he gets into a rhythm and he starts feeling himself, he strings together some really good performances. Whether it's him getting hot in the playoffs or toward the end of the regular season, and 2022 was probably his best year in terms of consistency throughout the year. He was just pretty dang good. And if he heads in that direction, I start to feel a little better about this offense. And the wide receivers, I mean, Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown just took over that game at various points as well, each beating Isaiah Rodgers in big-time moments. Devontae Smith on that 79-yard deep go ball touchdown. He finished with 9 catches, 183 yards, a career high for him in yardage. And A.J. Brown had 4 for 121 and 2 touchdowns, and he beat Isaiah Rodgers on that fourth down to close out the game. So if those three are clicking, I feel a lot better about this team. But Bob, the run game, I mean, part of it is Minnesota definitely focused on it, but we're heading into week 8 now. Week 7's over, and Saquon Barkley and this thing just hasn't gotten going, and maybe it's time to start to feel a little worried about that because as much as I just hyped up the passing game, they're not a balanced team. Eventually that's going to catch up to them. So I am a little concerned about this running game, but I feel better about the passing game after that Vikings win.
Yeah, I mean, Saquon is on pace to run for less than 1,000 yards this year. I think it's eight. I forget. I figured 800 or something was the number I figured out after Sunday's game. I don't have it right in front of me this second, but if you told me that was going to be the case, and the Eagles were going to be after 7 games, and the Eagles would be 5-2, I would have recommended a fine psychiatrist that anybody could go see at any time. But it does have to be fixed. The thing, and Saquon made this point after the game, was they're 30th ranked offense or rushing offense in the league right now. The point that Saquon did make after this game, which I thought was a good one, was that they stuck with the run, even though and the weird part is, and I think Ruben Frank kind of on our call today was hitting he's averaging something like 5.1 yards. I think Ruben said on the call on in the first quarter, and it just as the game goes on, that number goes down, and that's exactly the opposite of what Saquon did last year. As the game went on, the Eagle, Saquon and the offensive line wore teams down, and he got so many big plays. That's just not happening. And to me, I'm probably going to try to dive into that a little bit more this week. To me, as I watch it, and watch, after, post the video after the game that's available to us, it seems to be more of an offensive line problem to me than a Saquon problem. Because Saquon had an incredible run in that game where he was about to be tackled 4 yards in the backfield, and he just spun away, picked up 7, 8 yards, whatever it is, 9 yards. When he runs and he gets space, he looks like the same Saquon Barkley to me. There's just so many times where he's not getting space, and I do think that's a reflection of just an offensive line that has not been able to play together going back to training camp. But I say that, and there were times last year where they weren't all together either. Where Jordan Mailata was out for a good chunk of time. Lane missed a game here and there. Uh, but it's especially true on the interior that it's been banged up. You got a new guy in Steen. It just doesn't seem like the same dominating offensive line. I sure would, I sure wish we could get a chance to talk to Jeff Stoutland and get his take on this whole thing. But I do think it's more of an offensive line thing, and maybe also, the interesting thing here to me is that Jalen Hurts also is not having any success running the ball, and maybe that's what really needs to happen for this offense for the ground game to get going again. But if you look, he Jalen was 4 for -10 on Sunday, 7 for 13, and 2 for 3 in his last 3 games. So what's that? 60. He's got 13 carries for 6 yards in the last 3 games after being pretty effective through the first 4 games on the ground. He was more of the ground game than Saquon. So I mean, it's really there's a lot to dig into with that ground game, and what's wrong with it. But they did shift gears, and they found ways to just torch the Vikings secondary. The only you pointed out Zay Rogers, AJ Brown burning him. The only former Eagle who may have had a worse game than Carson Wentz was Isaiah Rogers, because he got torched by Devontae Smith on his long 79-yard touchdown too. He did not have a good day at all. If you go back and watch the first AJ Brown touchdown, he's going in motion with AJ to the left, and then stops, and I guess it was zone coverage, but he stops, and it leaves AJ one-on-one with a linebacker, and that ain't fair. So
No, it's not fair. And the run game issues, I'm with you on it. More offensive line than a Saquon problem. Last year and throughout Jeff Stoutland's tenure as the offensive line coach, they've thrived on running inside zone. In late game situations, and not just late game situations, just in general last year, they would run it behind their big physical mauling offensive guards who are playing both at the very high level, especially Landon Dickerson, but Mekhi Becton as well. And they would wear teams out, and they were able to run inside zone. And that interior offensive line, even Cam Jurgens in his first year replacing Kelsey as a full-time starter at center, I mean, super athletic, and he was getting out and pulling, and they had such a dominant interior that they could still run behind the tackles as well with some outside zone. Uh, they can't run behind the interior right now, so they're not exactly able to dictate what they want to do, and I'm not sure if that gets better. I mean, it probably got even worse. And it definitely got even worse when Cam Jurgens left that game and Brett Toth had to come in. And if Cam Jurgens is out for an extended period with the knee injury that he suffered in that game, Brett Toth said after the game that Jurgens came back in that one drive after he got evaluated that he put a knee brace on and tried to play through it. He got an MRI. There's been no word of the seriousness of that injury. But if Cam Jurgens is to miss a long stretch, already with Landon Dickerson playing through a multitude of injuries this year, not being at 100%, not playing to the level that we're used to seeing. And then with Tyler Steen, who I think has been fine, but in some ways has been a downgrade from Mekhi Becton, at least in the run game. He just doesn't have the size that Mekhi Becton does in that area. I'm not sure how this gets going or what is the solution if the offensive line doesn't play that well. And that's a worry for this team going forward. There are worries on this defense as well, Bob. So now let's go over there with Dory Jackson getting hurt in this game and Keely Ringo getting hurt in this game. But they found a way, or not Keely Ringo getting hurt in this game, but Keely Ringo placing a Dory Jackson after he got hurt. But even with that, even with some big plays like Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, the defense did enough, as you mentioned earlier, to to stop the Vikings. Some of that, yes, was due to with Carson Wentz just starting earlier in the game with like that wobbling pass, like on like that. I think he was trying to throw it out to Addison, and if Addison catches it, he has all the space in front of him, and Carson just can't get it to him. So yes, it was some luck, but we talked about before we came on this podcast the best day from the edge rush group. Nakobe Dean did very well as well. Are you more confident that this defense will put it all together than the offense at some point?
Uh, yes, and no, because I'm concerned about the secondary. You know, the Quinyon Mitchell again, and maybe he's playing with a bit of a hamstring here, but it looked like they were zoned past that. And this is another bad, actual bad moment for Carson Wentz early in the game. Addison got behind him and he just lost track of him. And if Carson Wentz throws him a good pass, it's probably 7 points. There were several of them, and then there was an Addison one in the flat. So I'm more. I have concerns about the defense mostly um, because of the secondary right now. Quinyon was sensational last year, and right now he's dealing with a hamstring. He's just played okay so far. I do think they have a terrific interior, one of the best three interiors in the game with Carter, especially if Carter starts to get healthy here at some point during the season. Off to a bit of a slow start especially for him, but I understand that there's a lot of talent on this defense, but there's a lot of talent. I think there's more talent on the offense. So I here's one of my favorite stats of all time, and I'm not sure it has all that much to do with anything, but I just remember it accentuates that things can change in this league in a hurry for no great reason. But the 2006 Indianapolis Colts, I just remember going there. They beat the crap out of the Eagles. It was right after McNabb got hurt and Jeff Garcia replaced McNabb, and the Eagles went to Indy and they lost 45-21. But the Colts were that year were the 32nd, number 32 run defense in the league. Just stunk. Gave up 100 yards every game that season. Gave up over 180 yards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in 16 games. Even gave up 395 in one game. And then they got to the postseason, and they gave up 44 in a win over the Chiefs, 83 in a win over the Ravens, 93 in a win over the Patriots, and then they did give up 111, but I think a lot of that was garbage time yards. And they were the best run defense in postseason football that year. So that kind of stuff does happen in this league, and the Eagles still have if they can get the offensive line right. And one of the things is that I'm curious to see this week is if Brett Toth plays at center, or if they move Landon to center and maybe put Toth back at guard. The Eagles have all said this is curious to me. Both Kevin Batul and Nick Sirianni have said that the under center plays were not a reflection of a change in Cam going out and then Brett Toth coming in. But I'm a little skeptical of that, just because it's imprinted in my mind. Training camp and OTAs, an OTA in particular, where he couldn't snap the ball in the shotgun. He just over and over again, and then it happened again in training camp with him and Trevor Keegan when he was still here. Neither one of them could snap the ball. They couldn't run a play because they couldn't snap the football. And I remember in OTAs, Toth being so frustrated because he had so many bad ones in a row, that going over to Cam Jurgens, who wasn't participating yet because he was still recovering from back surgery, and just throwing his hands up. And so I'm not entirely buying in that it's just about that's what we wanted to do. And I'll be curious to see what they do this week at center if they continue to go that way. And on top of that, Brett Toth, I thought had a little bit of a rough game, as you pointed out when he came in anyway. So, uh, there are questions on both sides, as you pointed out. Which one I have more confidence in? I still think I have more confidence in the offense because I think at some point here, they are going to get healthy, and they are going to start to play consistent, and they are going to be able to run the football. That's my belief right now.
I'm having a tough time deciding between this because I can argue the defense for the simple fact that I have more confidence in Vic Fangio coaching wise and his scheme and being able to get the most out of his players, whereas I don't have the same level of confidence in Kevin Patullo, who's a first time play caller in the NFL. But there is more obvious holes on the Eagles defense, and we'll get into that a little more in a second. But corner and edge rusher, well, there's some depth and frontline starting concerns at those positions, and there's some young players playing on this defense, like Andrew Makuba, who's up and down, and even Jahad Campbell is great, but he's a rookie and he's prone to mistakes as well. So there's obviously more holes on this defense that if especially at corner and edge, if the personnel doesn't change, especially at corner, I don't know if Vic Fangio can make up for that. But at the same time, I don't know if Kevin Batul is going to always get the most out of his players on offense. But at the same time, I mean, we saw on some of those plays when it looked like it broke down. I mean, Jalen Hurts played out of his mind, and you have AJ Brown and Devontae, even with the run game. I mean, Saquon Barkley still, I would believe, is still an immensely talented player. They can overcome scheme and more issues potentially than the defense. So I don't know. I'm really split between this answer. But either way, neither unit has been consistent this year. They have not been playing well overall, and they haven't put up good numbers. And I saw Drew Brees put out something on ESPN today. It might have been on First Take. I believe it was on First Take, saying he can't believe this team is 5-2. And I see his point a little bit. I mean, they found ways to win games despite not playing well in certain areas. So I'm not sure who I feel better about, but the defense did make an addition this week, a familiar face coming back that they are hoping can help, probably from an on-field perspective, and from a leadership perspective as well. And Brandon Graham, the franchise legend who retired after a storybook ending last year, going out with a Super Bowl victory, coming back in time after tearing his triceps in Week 11 to help the Eagles knock off the Kansas City Chiefs. Played 15 years with the Eagles, became a beloved member of the city. And hey, we all thought he was, walking away. That we would see him again. Big already started a podcast with PHLY, and we knew that he was pursuing that angle. But who knew that Brandon Graham would be back, and we'll be seeing him in the locker room this week. I'm sure again telling us, locker room's over. So Brandon Graham's back. What's your perspective on them deciding to get him out of retirement and convincing him to play again?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen them do this before with veteran defensive guys. Who was the defensive tackle they did it with a few years ago? Was it Sue? Yeah, I think it was.
Okay.
It was Sue, and somebody else too. So we've seen
Linval,
it do. What's that?
Linval Joseph, and they got
Linval Joseph was another one, right, in 2022 when they went to the Super Bowl. So we've seen him do it with veteran players before. Just never one who was, had such a history with the team, and that's what makes it such a big deal. But it's kind of an admission that they do think they need help at edge, and I'm sure Zadarius Smith's retirement exacerbated that. Brandon kind of hinted at, that's when they first started talking. They were talking about maybe doing it after the bye week, but this accelerated the timeline. We still don't know if he's going to play before the bye week. There's one more game, obviously, this week before the bye. Yeah, is Brandon Graham going to be a positive influence in the locker room? Yes. Will he be less of one if um, if he's not on the field? His voice will still be heard, but you just don't have the same impact in the locker room if you're not one of the guys who's really contributing on a daily basis. I mean, if you think about it, he wasn't around for the last 5 weeks last season, and that's when the Eagles maybe started playing some of their best football, um, and into the playoffs. So, uh, I mean, he was around, but he was not the same, locker room factor they had been earlier in the season. I'm not sure all of that stuff isn't um, overrated. What Brandon Graham was for the Eagles last year was a terrific player for 11 weeks. Now that's what they need him to be. I think I wrote in my column for this morning that they didn't even play, somewhere near the level of either Nolan Smith, who's been out for the last 4 weeks, or Zadarius Smith, who played really well for the 5 weeks he was there. If he can play as well as either, close to the level that either of the Smiths were playing, then he's going to help the Eagles when he gets here. But if he can't, and he's just the guy who's the friendliest trash talker in the history of the NFL, that's less of an impact. So it'll be I'll be eager to see what he is. You got to remember he's now had 2 tricep surgeries in the last calendar year. I guess had him 2 within 2 or 3 months of each other. And he's 37 years old. Um, I just know that there are some retirement stories, guys coming out of retirement stories that are good in professional sports. George Foreman, to me, being the greatest one ever. Um, he didn't look like he could box anymore when you just looked at him, but after he sold all those grills to people, but he came back and he won another heavyweight championship. But there's so many of these come out of retirement stories that just fizzle and never really become anything. I hope for Brandon's sake. I hope for BG's sake. He is. It comes back and it works out the way he wants it to. But I just thought it was such a perfect ending the other way. Him holding up 2 Lombardis, retiring, tearful. I guess it was. As he's talking today, he said it was still in him even then. But I'm a little bit skeptical of how much impact he's going to have here.
And that's fair. I found it interesting that I believe he also said on his podcast this morning, he was explaining to Bo Wolf like his desire to come back, and he talked about how after week 1, I believe that like the same time that the Eagles brought in Zadarius Smith, the Eagles reached out to him at that point, and he kind of said no, like he was at that time he didn't think that was what he wanted. Obviously that's changed, but the Eagles have had interest, it seems, in Brandon Graham at least since the beginning of the season, and Vic Fangio talked about today how he's been trying to convince him to come back for 1 year since one more year since the end of last year. So the Eagles value his production. He was still playing at a really great level last year before he got hurt. 3.5 sacks and 20 tackles. He was arguably their best edge rusher last year. And we kind of forget because of how dominant they were in the playoffs. I mean, this is an edge group that struggled through the first 9-10 weeks of last season as well. And they
Right.
really
I'm going to put my vote in for Josh Sweat last year, but
yeah.
go ahead.
Yes, but that is fair. But I also feel like Josh Sweat's best performances came towards the end of the year, where some of his signature moments. But that is fair. But I agree with you though on just the fact that we don't know what Brandon Graham will be, and I hope for the Eagles' sake that they don't believe that adding 37-year-old Brandon Graham, who hasn't played football since last February, who had 2 significant upper body injuries last year, is going to come in and fix an edge group who, yes, they had their best performance against the Vikings, and I think you can feel encouraged about Jalen Hunt's long-term potential. You feel decent about like Josh Uche is a solid rotational pass rusher. You'll get Nolan Smith back from injury soon. Um, Maybe they can put it all together, but I don't. I hope they don't think that Brandon Graham, if they're worried about the pass rush, which this move at least indicates they think they're not good enough there. I hope they don't think this is the move that will change that necessarily. And I going back to the defense, there is more holes than offense, and from a personnel standpoint, and that's from edge rusher to corner as well. Where Vic talked about how he thought Adoree did fine against Minnesota and Keeley did fine, but Adoree also got banged up in that game, and both players have been inconsistent this year. And Jacorian Bennett, the one trade they made, he's been on injured reserve the last month. So corner and edge rusher are still somewhat concerning. The trade deadline is coming up in 2 weeks, Bob. There'll be more talk as we get closer. Do you expect them to make some move to make this defense better, to make Vic Fangio's life a little bit easier?
I do. I expect him to try. You know, as we both pointed out here, they need help there. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. You know, Chubb from the Dolphins is a guy you've pointed out. Um, you know, Cam Taylor Britt is a guy with the Bengals. Maybe. I don't know. It's so hard to tell. It seems to me still. People are. I guess this is my baseball covering bias, where the baseball trade deadline is a crazy, really crazy time where you really see some major things happening, and football's loosened up some in that regard in the last 3 or 4 years, but it's still a lot of times a lot of hype, a lot more hype, and a lot less action. But the Eagles need to, you know, to me, I wrote this recently too. You know, Howie Roseman did not have his best offseason, and this is going to be his last chance to really do something that impacts his team, whether what direction it's going to go in the second half and in the postseason here, uh, will be impacted by what Howie can end up ultimately doing at the trade deadline. If he can get that one guy, this is a team that if they got the right guy right now, and I don't know who that is, but if they got the right guy, specifically on defense, that it they could it could be the thing that puts them over the top and gets them back in that conversation as the they're a legitimate Super Bowl contender right now just because on their reputation, and they are the defending champs, but could drive that to even another level.
Yeah, yeah, and edge rusher, uh, and we're talking about it before we went on, where they have some bodies in that room. So maybe from if you're not getting a real upgrade there from a depth perspective, they already have depth. I don't think that's the problem. I mean, they have a bunch of rotational type edge rushers behind Nolan Smith, and maybe Jalen becomes more than that eventually. I think he could, but I don't know if he's there yet. But in that same sense, that I mean, Ezekiel Ojulari had a hamstring injury this week, and Vic said he doesn't know if he's going to play against the Giants on Sunday, and we don't know how long he'll be out for. Nolan Smith is going to come back soon, but Nolan Smith now has some injuries added to his resume where I think you have to be a little concerned with his injury history now, getting banged up, getting hurt in the Super Bowl last year, and then getting re-injured or another injury beginning this season, and now that's starting to add up. And he has a smaller frame. Can he stay healthy consistently? And then you lost to Darius Smith, a guy that's a proven edge rusher, so you kind of don't have as much of that anymore. I obviously added Brandon Graham, but and I don't really buy Patrick Johnson as a pass rusher. And even before Aziz got hurt, I mean, he flashed in that Denver game, but he wasn't getting on the field a ton. And they lost Agbo Okoronkwo earlier this year. I mean, they've had so much injuries there, and I just don't know if I really buy into who they have. And but I agree that that I don't know necessarily if they'll get someone, but if they do get someone, I feel like it's easier at this point to get a value at edge rusher. Because I'm not sure what corner is coming available. Are you going for Cam Taylor Britt or Tyreek Woolen or guys like that? But they're all kind of projections, like change of scenery type guys.
Maybe the guy I would like best at cornerback is bring back a guy who was around when they first started. Is Rasul Douglas, uh, the pride of East Orange, New Jersey. He's played very well for the Dolphins this year. He's 30 years old now, but having a guy with that pedigree, he's played well for a bad team. But if they could pry him away from the Dolphins, who certainly have plenty, lots of reasons to sell the farm right now. So he's a guy that does interest me a little bit. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, you're good. I still think I'd be more interested in the pass rushers though, because I think you can mask coverage with a really good pass rush. And I feel like whether it's Bradley Chubb or Jalen Phillips, and the player that actually I think if I were the Eagles, I'd be the most interested in, and he's probably going to be more costly than Bradley Chubb because of his age and potential. Would be Jermaine Johnson from the Jets. I mean, the Jets are 0-7. You heard Woody Johnson talk on Tuesday about how if they could throw a pass, maybe they wouldn't be 0-7. But it seems like a franchise that is in a weird spot where like maybe they sell off some of their pieces to try to build for the future. And Jermaine Johnson's young, and he is coming off an Achilles from the 2024 season, but in 2023 he was a Pro Bowler. He was an ascending young pass rusher. He's looked pretty good since returning from injury during this year. He got banged up again, but he's played well when he has played. And he is young, and you could potentially view him as part of your future as well. That is the guy that I would be most interested in. I don't know if I'd have a ton of interest in, these one-off, 10-game rental guys. Like, I mean, Howie Roseman, buyer beware at the trade deadline. I mean, he doesn't have the best history with some of these rental type players, Robert Quinn and Golden Tate, and he's missed on a lot of these guys. If they were able to get a young player that they could possibly be a part of the future here, I think that would be the best move. And that's why I would have interest in a guy like Jermaine Johnson, potentially at edge. And I don't know if there's a corner out there that has that same level of ceiling. So if they make a move, I think they should go edge. And it's not like you have to keep Patrick Johnson or Azeez Ojulari or, I mean, more Patrick Johnson on the roster. If you feel like you can upgrade that, I feel like I would.
Yeah, I mean that's a he's a guy who Johnson's a guy who, as you pointed out, injury last year and not really come back and been a star that he looked like he might become in his first couple of years with the Jets. I mean that's looking ahead beyond just doing something for this roster. There are. It's going to be an interesting trade deadline. Like I said, this is Howie's last chance to really upgrade a roster that's clearly not as good as the one that was firing on all cylinders when last season ended.
Yeah, and you make a point. He went bargain shopping this off season, and he didn't really hit on any of those bargains. So he said back in the winter it would look different this year. They were going to have to go young. They were not going to be able to invest as much money. They didn't have as much to spend, and it would have been nice if they were able to hit on a few of these guys, and they really haven't. So he might be in a position where he has to make a move. I also throw out that Jordan Schultz reported that Will McDonald has been in some trade talks, the other young Jets edge rusher. Those are guys that if Howie were able to do that, those would be the types of moves I think could eventually have a long-term reward and help the Eagles immediately as well. And maybe he finds a corner because you make a point. Russell Douglas would probably be an upgrade still over what they have right now. They're just not getting enough consistent play out of Adoree Jackson and Keely Ringo. And Keely Ringo really hurt them 2 weeks ago when they played the New York Giants on Thursday night. He had a tough game, giving up a 50-50 ball downfield to start that game, delivered Jordan Humphrey. Next drive, gets beat by Wan'Dale Robinson, and he doesn't touch him. Wan'Dale gets up and picks up a bunch of extra yards. That was a game where Keely Ringo lost his job again because Adoree Jackson started last week against the Vikings, but we don't even know Adoree's status because he left that game. They're going to play the Giants again, and I'm sure the Giants might try to pick on whoever is at corner for the Eagles on Sunday. But let's get into this game. 2 weeks ago, it was a gut check for the Eagles. They got dominated from a physical perspective with Cam Scadaboo. Jackson Dart picked apart their secondary, and the Eagles offense missed some huge opportunities in that game. They dropped the 4-2. It felt like the sky was kind of falling. They went out and beat Minnesota last week, but now they got to play that same team again, this time at Lincoln Financial Field on Sunday. Bob, what's your expectations for this Eagles-Giants matchup? Giants coming in off a crazy loss against the Denver Broncos, letting up 33 points in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, sell your season ticket type of losses. I think how Steve Politi described it. But he in that same column he also wrote that, and oddly, I'm feeling better about the Giants after watching that game, and I understand what he's saying because the Giants got the Eagles' attention uh, 2 weeks ago when they went in there and they beat him up physically and they dominated the game, and they've convinced Vic Fangio that they have their quarterback of the future. But what a weird 2 years he's been for the Giants. At least this year they've got two rookies that have energized the organization in Jackson Dart and Cam Scadaboo. But at the same time, they're watching Daniel Jones play at an MVP level for the Super Bowl favorite Indianapolis Colts. Yeah, I saw that coming. Uh, so it's been a strange year to be a Giants fan in that regard. But there is some hope there, and to me, this game is a much better measuring stick for where the Eagles are at than the one we saw, the one we saw last week in Minneapolis, because of what the Giants did do 2 weeks ago. So I'm really curious to see how the Eagles come out. I think it would have been maybe even more interesting if the Giants had actually won that game and came in here with a 3-4 record, and feeling like, hey, you know what, we're good enough to we already proved we're good enough to play with the Eagles, and now we proved it again by beating a team on the road that they lost to at home. It's going to be, as a young team, it'll be interesting to see how the Giants react to such a devastating loss. It's going to be a week of, should we fire Shane Bowen? Should we fire Brian Dable? Why are any of these guys here for them up there? But for the Eagles, it's a chance to make amends for what happened in New York. And to me, the key here is they kind of let Jackson Dart run free way too much in that game 2 weeks ago. He was making way too many off schedule plays. I think that's going to be a lot more difficult for them to do with Jalen Carter back in the mix, and he's going to get some of that upfront pressure. I don't know if the Giants played their backup center last week. Michael Schmidt got hurt. He got hurt against the Eagles in the last game and didn't play on Sunday, and that could end up being the key to this game. I can remember sitting here 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, talking to you about this game, and if the Eagles lose this game, they're in real trouble. And they did lose that game. Scadaboo ran for 3 touchdowns, and Jackson Dart ran for 1. But we're still in that same position. If the Eagles lose this game, then they're what they did against the Vikings really means nothing. But if they come back and they play a strong game and beat the Giants and the way they should, well, then they're going to go into the bye week with 6-2, and say what they want about point differential, where they're ranked rushing the football, where they're at this and that, and what Nick Sirianni says, that it's all about winning and getting better. That applies a lot better at 6-2 than it does at 5-3 and having lost to the Giants, a division opponent who's in last place twice. So it's a fascinating game to me.
Yeah. And if you're a Giants fan, even after that loss, I mean, and that was an ugly way, a tough pill to swallow to lose a game in that fashion. You saw the anger spill out of Brian Burns when he came off the field. In that video that went viral where he's cussing and he's upset. I mean, that is a tough way to lose the game. But Vic Fangio said it today that he thinks a lot of teams are going to pass up or regret passing up on Jackson Dart. It looks like they have found their quarterback. They have some energy. We talk about swagger, and the Eagles preached that last week in team meetings and how they need to get their confidence back and they need to play free and which they did it against Minnesota. But this is a Giants team that was having a bunch of fun over the last couple of weeks. Maybe that changes with a loss like that, but I mean, they're playing with kind of like nothing to lose, and they're a dangerous team because of that. And Jackson Dart looks like a really solid starting quarterback. And they have a physical runner, and they have a very talented defensive line. Brian Burns is an NFL sack leader right now. They have a deep defensive line. They have Abdul Carter and Dexter Lawrence, and uh, yes, their record is not great, but they're a much better team than I think they were last year. And a big part of that has to do with Dart, but also the defensive line. So it's not an easy win. And yeah, you're right, Bob. I mean, if they lose this game, that win against Minnesota means nothing. They're 5-3. And then they would have lost, one of their past 4 games, and those problems that we talk about on offense and defense, they'll continue to linger. We'll continue to be worried about them. So this is a must-win game. I know it's the regular season, but 5-3 would not feel good for this team, especially with the issues, and it would only highlight them even more. Are you?
There's a I'll just add this to that. You know, as impressed as we've all been, including Vic Fangio, about Jackson Dart, and I didn't see the game, so I'm just looking at the numbers here. But Denver sort of had a template, even though he threw for 3 touchdowns, of how to stop him. He only completed 45% of his passes, 15 for 33. He did have 283 yards, so they got some big plays obviously in that game. But he was also sacked 4 times. And here to me is the big key. This is what the Eagles need to do. Even though he ran for a touchdown, threw for 3, he ran 5 times for 11 yards. So they obviously had a good game plan for how to stop him and force him into mistakes. He threw an interception. He's thrown 3 interceptions. The Eagles made him look better than he is at this point in his career. So I'm going to be shocked if Vic Fangio doesn't have a better game plan for him this time.
So after saying that, are you? I mean, I know we're still early in the week here, but are you predicting an Eagles win with a decent amount of confidence?
I am predicting an Eagles a win in this game. I'm going to go back to what I saw in Minnesota from Jalen Hurts, and what I know of Jalen Hurts, and the competitor he is. And there seemed to be the good thing for this team when the passing game works and the running game doesn't, is you see a happy AJ Brown, although he didn't talk after the game, whatever that was about. But as we've discussed many times in this forum before, AJ is a different kind of dude. But he was obviously happy with the way things were going in that game, and that Jalen was getting him the ball. So we saw a bunch of happy pass catchers. And Saquon is, and Jalen kind of spoke to this after the game too. Saquon, he ain't just, he's frustrated about his personal numbers right now and the way the running game isn't working. But he's not just saying it to say it when he says, I don't care, we won. So, you don't have to worry about him moping about, oh, I only have this, I only have that. He sincerely means when we win, that's what I care most about. And I do think at some point they're going to figure the running game out if Jeff Stoutland can get things right on the offensive line. But that's a matter of being healthy and having the right guys out there. So we'll see if he can find the right combination at some point. But yes, I am predicting that Jackson Dart is not going to come into Philadelphia and do the same thing he did at the Meadowlands, however many days ago it was.
Yeah, I'll predict the same thing. The Eagles will win. They'll go 6-2, head into the bye week, and then that's when things will get more difficult. After the bye, they'll play the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field on Monday night. The following week, they'll have the Detroit Lions, and those will be more of the tests for this team. What adjustments?
That's the meat. We're going to get into the meat after the bye.
And what adjustments they make after the bye? Can they start playing more consistent? Because honestly, eventually, I mean, as Vic Fangio said, they got some breaks in that game defensively, but the same thing from an offensive perspective. They've gotten some breaks. They're super talented and they find a way to win games, but will they start playing actually like the team that we think they could be based off their talent after the bye? That would be the real answer. And like you said, yes, that would be the meat. That would be the test. Can they beat those NFC contenders? But I don't think they'll lose to the Giants, who are not there yet. I don't know if they will get there, but they are not of that caliber yet. And if they do lose, it will be concerning. But I'm not going to predict a loss. I'm going to predict a win as well. Everyone, thank you for tuning in for another podcast of the No Huddle Show. We appreciate you always listening. If you come back, we appreciate you. If you're a new listener, keep coming back. We'll keep doing this every week. And make sure to read our written content on NJ.com throughout this week, as we have you covered for this Eagles-Giants game and throughout the year, as they try to go on another deep playoff run, and we'll see if they actually do it. But we'll catch you next time, and everyone have a good day.